All right, so last week undoubtedly was all about the Oculus Rift as far as VR discussion on the show is concerned. And now 1 week later, we have the release of its biggest rival, the HTC Vive. Joining us to talk all about her time spent with the consumer version of the Vive is Addie Robertson from The Verge. How's it going, Addie?
Hi, great.
It's great to have you here. So first things first, right off the top, your article is excellent. Fantastic layout. Loved it. Excellent read. You spent a lot of time both with the HTC Vive Pre, which was the developer kit, and then now the consumer version that officially launched today to the public. What kind of big changes do you see from one to the other, or are there any?
Hardware-wise, there are almost no changes. The big change is sort of the polish of Steam VR, the version of Steam that runs in VR, obviously. It's still kind of rough and glitchy, but it functions. And there are a lot of new features, like you can see your desktop in it now, or you can play any offline game in VR, or any non-VR game in what looks like a big screen in VR.
Is that very satisfying? I have to...
It's not hugely satisfying.
Okay,
but
all right.
It's not bad.
It's a stopgap, essentially. What about comfort? Anytime I see these goggles, and I did spend a little bit of time with the Pre, probably a month ago, maybe 5 or 10 minutes tops. So I didn't get a long-term sense of comfort. But how does the HTC Vive stack up as far as comfort for long-term play?
I don't find the Vive particularly comfortable, and most of the people that I've talked to don't either, especially compared to the Oculus Rift, which is really well balanced. The Vive is sort of front heavy. It's a heavy headset, and it kind of drags your face forward. It's not bad. You can get used to it, but I would definitely get a little bit of a headache, and my neck actually would get a little bit stiff.
For sure.
So that's interesting. It's prettier, it looks nicer, but it's not as comfortable.
I'm not as much of a fan of its design as I am of the Oculus Rift, hardware-wise, but it's a matter of preference at this point.
Yeah, I really think so. No matter what, you're wearing a huge thing on your face, and it's a sliding scale, I think, as far as what one person thinks is doable and the other person thinks is hideous. What about setting up the space? Because I know there's definitely a little bit more of a challenge around kind of setting up the HTC Vive for all of the motion tracking. How is that with the consumer version?
So again, it's pretty much the same as the last development kit. We timed it on my video, and it took about 20 minutes for me to set up after I've probably set it up a few times now, and I more or less know the drill. The biggest issue is just finding somewhere that's tall enough to put your base stations, the laser towers. We managed to do it with camera stands and a bookshelf. They come with wall mounts that you can actually screw into the wall. The biggest issue is really just being able to clear enough space. It's like, imagine having a Kinect and then multiply that by several times.
Right.
So explain the front-facing camera a little bit. Does that make it like augmented reality at all?
It does, but it makes it sort of augmented reality in the way that the Gear VR has augmented reality with the pass-through camera. So what it can do is basically show you either in sort of thumbnail image of what's happening when you go to the home screen, so you can, I don't know, look at your phone or pick up a glass of water, or it can actually show you a sort of stylized version of the rest of the world when you hit the home button or whenever you get to the outlines. It's really useful. It's not augmented reality the way HoloLens is augmented reality, but it sort of adds that connection to the outside world that the Vive has done a really good job of emphasizing.
Yeah, it kind of gives you a little bit of a confidence pass through, let's say. And it looks kind of futuristic. What happens in the case of like tracking kind of, I don't know, malfunction or whatever? Is there ever a point where things kind of get glitchy and it removes you out of the experience? So, talking about immersion, that sort of thing.
So the biggest problem for me would be people walking through my field of through the space sort of between me and the laser towers, where occasionally you would sort of see your controller start slipping away a little bit. It was like it's floating out of your hands. Occasionally your screen will just go completely blank gray when it loses tracking altogether. The problem is it's not always entirely clear what's causing this. Sometimes it's really obvious. It's somebody just walking in front of you. Other times it seems like there's something that's blocking it, but it's not clear if it's that or if it's just a glitch. There's a lot of uncertainty using the Vive. when it works well, it works really well, but it doesn't seem like something that I fully understand all of the quirks of.
Right.
So what games have you played so far with it?
My favorite's probably, it's not a game actually, it's called Tilt Brush. It is a three-dimensional painting tool. I'm also a really big fan of a zombie horror survival shooter called The Brookhaven Experiment and a stealth game called Budget Cuts, both of which are just demos. They're very short, they're not full games, but they use the Vive's controllers in really fun, interesting ways.
And so have you played any of the games on both the Rift and the Vive?
I played their sort of sitting down games, and I've played things like Job Simulator, which is a very cross-platform. It's on Sony's PlayStation VR. It's on the Vive. It's going to be on Oculus Touch. And they function very similarly. Right now, obviously, you only have one tracking camera with the Rift, and you can't move around all that much. But with two cameras, I've seen you get roughly the amount of space that I've gotten with the Vive.
All right, so the kind of broader question here, obviously the HTC Vive is the more expensive VR solution of the two that we're talking about today, $800. Is the Vive worth it? Is it worth it for only kind of VR, crazy people like early adopters, or do you think it's poised for more of a broader push than that?
The cost question's a little bit open right now because we don't know how much the Oculus Touch controllers are going to cost, and I really think that they're going to be vital for the experience. But that still probably won't make it more expensive than the Vive. I think that the Vive is really useful for anyone who is very consciously interested in being a VR early adopter. It's not really something that I would recommend to someone who's just sort of curious about VR and wants to check it out, because it requires a lot of just time investment and willingness to deal with early hardware and early games. It's a bit more like a development kit than the Oculus Rift, which you can just plug in and it will almost always work.
Well, I can't wait to get my hands on one. I'm sure we're going to get one here in the studio at some point. Behind me, we have the Oculus Rift, and I'm carving out some time tonight after I'm done with all my shows. I'm going to go over there at least for a half an hour and get lost in it a little bit. I'm really looking forward to it. Loved your review, Addie, and thank you so much for coming on to kind of talk about your experience. Tell people where they can find all your work online.
I am at theverge.com. We're youtube.com/The Verge, and I am also at Twitter at the Dextriarchy, which I think is on my lower third there.
Yep, we got it. Addie, thank you so much.
Thanks, Addie.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night.